All right. Well, welcome, many of you. What would anyone like to begin with or make sure that we get through today?
I would appreciate an update from Chris on his work. I was hoping to cover that in one of the previous meetings, but I'm been looking into and am interested in the taxonomy work and discussions. I think that Chris's inquiry triggered off about human systems inquiry and how can we search on the archives and the material for that. So, Chris, if you are still working on that, maybe we could either have an update or we could catch up offline. I'd appreciate a chat.
I'll be very brief. I don't have an update as such. I think what was decided was that since the PDFs haven't actually been scanned into text, that there might be a strategy to phase in what's considered to be key text. I guess the only thing I can think to do is do some learning outside of the ISSS and see if it can be applied in some sort of crude sense to sift through the authors. But I haven't done anything. I've had a week of eye surgery this week, and I was away in the US for a holiday and wedding and stuff. So I've been not really available. I'm interested in hearing any thoughts, but I don't have much to.
I thought when I checked that I did a random check and they were OCR'd. So what would be helpful, probably, is within the ISSS record, and you've done this, of course, there, Rob, is perhaps to go back to your spreadsheet. I think you have all of the index, and maybe I just need to remind myself of the index, or maybe we should put it on the ISSS website, and literally have another column that would identify those PDFs that actually are have been OCR'd. And then, I mean, the next question then to me is, let's assume we've got a number that are searchable on OCR capability. What's the next step in terms of building an interface or a way to form an inquiry? Short of, I mean, I've been doing this with some other PDFs I'm working on, sort of export the PDF because it's been OCR'd into something that then can almost index every word. And then can we start to build an API to ChatGPT, for example, that would produce a large language model of, let's just do a pilot on some small segment of those that are OCR'd, and then see where we go. John Kinnaman has been playing with ChatGPT with his Holon model, and I found the work that he did last week quite remarkable. He sort of trained ChatGPT to analyze his Holon model, and then to pass some comments and words into it, which is quite interesting. So that would be my thought, is like, let's take a subset or a small group of PDFs that are OCR'd, and what can we then do with them that would be helpful?
Have you got an inkling or a preference for which collection to concentrate on? The yearbooks or the conferences or the bulletins or anything else in particular?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's like, I don't, to be honest with you. I mean, Chris and I have talked about trying to find out where even human systems inquiry papers might be, as a for instance. And I'll admit I haven't had the time to go digging, but as these meetings come up and one gets prompted again, I could perhaps take another run at it. Okay, so Carl would vote for conferences, but then if there's a conference, we'd have to go and get the there's books of abstracts for the conferences, but I'm not aware of necessarily when the last conference. We might want to go to the last conference that produced papers, literally, because otherwise it's just a suite of abstracts with then links to the online version of the paper, if indeed it's even there. So
yeah, I
I
would
think that
actually
sorry, go on.
making sure that we have the programs and stuff, so we at least know who was speaking and or what papers are being presented and stuff. Just that high
Okay.
level.
Okay, well, I mean, that's a strategy which I'm perfectly happy to pursue, is that let's get the last 20 years worth of conference books that Jennifer will be produced, and I'll find them and we'll see if they're OCR'd, and then we can go from there. But the question then comes is, what's the interface, right? And how do you build an interface? And you're right. And then how do you index? How do you then, let's say I want to go in and ask the last 20 years of conferences who wrote something on human systems inquiry. I'd want to ask that question in that form, and then I'd want to get links back saying, this person here and this person here and this person here, here's the link. But you'd have to do a whole sort of text analysis, because unless there were keywords or human systems inquiry was in the title, or it had been tagged with that SIG, which might have happened in the past, but it's certainly not happening now. How would we actually go about accessing it? I would have to go poke around and find it, I suppose. But these are the interesting issues about finding anything.
I think that brings me back to the interest that I tried to express at the beginning. Because as I've dug into the sort of taxonomy, I'm calling it that, but I'm trying to paste in a sort of a set of terms that seem to relate around this. It's a realization that system science, or at least the SCA, or any content management, needs these aspects in order to pull the body of knowledge together. And so that's a conversation that I'd be interested in going up the learning curve with someone and supporting if I can, because the SA does have an interest in that. But it's to address this. I mean, there's a whole body of knowledge to address that kind of question, in terms of discovery or access and recommendations. These sorts of structures are behind those simple questions.
This all sounds very promising. I'm happy to participate once I can read again properly. I'm retraining how to read.
Are we talking weeks or months, maybe? Of
probably just weeks. So I can see my far distance is amazing, but I need a magnifying glass to type on the keyboard right now.
Well, certainly at your own pace, but we don't want to strain it. But talking might be good.
Yeah.
The later conferences, I think, they tended to produce maybe programs. They didn't produce proceedings so much. I think that ended up in the 5th issue of the SRBS, selected and curated articles. And then there was a period of time from about 2000 onwards, I think, where the proceedings are produced. I don't think they are actually. I don't know if they're the actual articles that were submitted, but there might be copies of them on the ISSS conference abstract system, and there might be a publisher that was involved that was contracted to publish or printed versions of them. So it's only really the early ones up to whenever it was 1990 that are in scanned copies, where the quality of the OCRing might not be near 100% or as rigorous as the digitally produced proceedings.
Well, the guide to the 2017 conference, I've just downloaded it, and it's keyword searchable. I just put in the word human, and interestingly, here we have in room SR 125, Human Systems Inquiry, Chair Daryl Kulak, and the papers that are there. So in that sense, that is searchable. And then there is the number of the paper, which of course is not a hot link in the PDF, but that would be the next stage in some way. So presumably I could then export this PDF as I can export it as anything, Word, image format or other format, RTF, for example, EPS, PS text, XML 1.0. So let's just go with that. I mean, we could just work with this one document as a case in point, and I can put it in the chat so you can put it on the coda there. But it would seem to. Oh, can I do that? Oh yeah. So access to file restricted by your account admin. So I don't know if you would like to open that up, or can you open that up on the fly, Daniel, so that I could upload a file? Can I do that? Oh,
Just email it to me right now and I'll bring it in.
okay, I'll email it to you. So I'll email you the file right now, and then the point about that is that we've got one file, and that's just a beginning discussion that is searchable and is the 2017 conference. And I think I might be able to go and find the other one. I mean, that might be interesting. I think there was one for the 2019 and 2018, but
yeah, let's bring it into Perplexity right now. Upload the file and see some basic things that we can do.
Right. Yeah. Let's do 2017. Okay.
I mean, in it just briefly in this space, the simplest thing to do is what we're about to do with this file you'll email me, where we'll just upload one document, or it can take multiple documents, and then just immediately address it.
Okay,
and
so
okay, thank you. Then the second level is the RAG, retrieval augmented generation, where basically a folder of documents, PDF or mixed text types, are embedded with a language model. And then when there's a prompt or a query, it first gets the semantically relevant documents and then puts that in the context window. And then the most work is the actual training of a model with an even larger amount of data. So we can kind of coarsely think about it in those stages, I guess. And then to this question, is this information in SCA, Rob? Or are OCRs distributed alongside primary information?
There isn't a column which indicates that the document has been OCR'd.
That's what I was wondering, is if we inventoried that, then we would know which ones need to be tackled and what the size of that problem is.
I'm happy to do that. If we're looking at the proceedings, what's your way of telling that it's OCR'd? Is it
just to literally open it up and go into the search bar and do a search? I mean, I just did
select,
on the word human and 168 hits. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's how I'm testing it.
Okay.
Oh, let me just, before I bring in the 2017, here's just one. This is an image model, but it's not a language model. But this is just looks like a normal pic, but if you kind of squint, or if you have eyesight issue, there's a word. The people's bodies spell a word. Yet, and there's many ways that it can be more and less subtle, but it's going to be highly possible for these types of images to be, it says obey, but these can be generated and remixed and woven in with real images to introduce all of these subliminal aspects. Also in the text, but I think the images will be more powerful and harder to detect.
Gosh.
Yeah, it's wild.
That is wild.
Yeah. And just like, someone comes up with like the concept, and then
Boom.
people just go everywhere with it. Okay. What would we want to ask this document? It's
Well, I
136
suggested
pages.
the use case of that I'm using is human systems inquiry, trying to find content on that.
To me, it feels like we need to find a source of things that we think mean human systems inquiry. Like, yes, you can prime the pump with itself, but it might be more effective to use external information to do some basic training and then go crazy internally.
Well,
I
I
mean,
think
so-
it's just a chicken and egg issue, isn't it? In a sense, I mean, you've got to know what training to give it, given the results you get when you don't train it. In a sense, it's almost like, but I mean, yeah, we could do. Anyway, yeah, I mean, this is intriguing. I just
my novice understanding is, taxonomies have synonyms and see alsos. So you might type in human systems inquiry, but there's a whole synonyms or even different language versions of the term, or different see alsos if there's connected authors. So it seems to me like there's old school or new school approaches. The new school might be this chat GPT and it's training itself. The old school might be human intervention and categorization and taxonomy creations and relationship creations. I think I'm more old school.
How does this look? Let's see how many it comes up with. But do these all look like real people? Some of them,
yes,
yeah.
oh yes, they are real
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
So that's
remember
one approach, and also that doesn't require perfect OCR. Like it's like the formatting can be broken and stuff, but if something's like hyphenated across lines, and so there's some edge cases too, but it's first passed as well. Let's see how many. 94. Well, we obviously don't know how many actually were mentioned. So
that could be a list of all the humans that are listed.
Yeah,
that's what
I
that
think
is.
this does marry up with some comments I saw about how technology could be thought of as good tools for people. So if we can marry up sort of human perception and good tools, then yeah, seem to be heading in the right direction.
yeah, and then developing the workshop, knowledge engineering workshop. Different tools, new tools come into play, different practices, some shared older practices, but it's like whether, say, like it's a point we've covered infinitely times. It gives a first draft. No, it doesn't do perfect, even with web search and the attached document. Maybe there's a different prompt that instead of saying mention topics, it would have given us something more conceptual. But that's the whole prompt engineering question work. Oh, maybe the prompt should have been, name all of the scientific topics, but there's no free lunch, there's no free prompt. every prompt is going to be just biasing our search in a different way through the semantic space, but we could at least record the things that we're asking. And then, I mean, without the OCR, it's also not just as simple as a checkbox. We would really want to know PDF V1 was OCR'd on this date by this algorithm, and here's the output version. Because then a future OCR could be better, and then we would want to rerun everything. So we kind of need to connect which OCR method is used.
Well, I think as far as conferences is concerned, my understanding of it is that every conference had a new instance of the software that is now being run by the PKS software, but it was a complete new instance, and that then Jennifer Wilby would get an output from that and import it into Word, which she had some way of automatically formatting it, which would then, obviously, when you saved it to PDF, probably just took the word for word as in Word. Now, since we've moved to the central management of the PKS journal's website, that's no longer possible. So that sort of diminished a capability of producing this kind of document automatically, which she was able to do, which has its consequences, of course, because I don't think, since Corvallis 2019, which I'll go and get in a minute, was the last conference face-to-face that produced a proceedings in the way that she produced them. That's the last time.
I need to run, but this sounds promising, and I can foresee a feedback loop between starting with humans and then doing ChatGPT, or starting with ChatGPT and using humans to rethink what it means, and the best way forward. So I could see this as promising. So
good.
Thank you. Take care.
A quick reminder, 2 weeks ago, pardon me, Peter was on the road and having some communications problems. Rob and I and Tom were on, and Tom was trying to make a presentation.
Oh, right.
So just, you might want to.
Yeah, that was not recorded.
Yeah,
so
right.
Sorry about that. But
Right.
but how can we best pick up there and capture what we need to?
Well, what happened was I think it was the day you were not able to participate, and I did start the whole thing, and then we had a thunderstorm and the power got cut out, and as a consequence, I disconnected. So that's why Tom's.
Yeah, I should have made like everybody a co-host or something.
Yeah, but okay. So I think that was the essence. Wasn't that what you're talking about, George?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tom had gotten sort of halfway through his what he wanted to talk about. I think, Tom, you said you had 2 slides you wanted to cover.
You can do it now if you want. Do you want to, Tom? I don't hear you.
Well, none of it was recorded.
Wait, I'm not hearing Tom. Is that just on my side though?
No, I can't hear Tom either.
Oh, okay. Tom, maybe check your microphone. Like you're not muted, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, your lips are moving, but we can't hear you. I just sent you 2019, Daniel.
Okay.
That any better?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Do you want to
Can I
present
share?
what you want to present now?
That would be good.
Yeah.
You see that?
Yeah, but you need to start from the beginning, I think, what you were saying, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Off you go.
All right, this is the last slide that I didn't show. And it's,
Why don't you start a little earlier just so we have the whole thing, even if you're going faster through it?
how do I go back on this? Okay, the previous week. Let me.
It's all good. It's all good like that, unless you want like animations or something. But it's clear. Okay. there you
Okay,
go.
the previous week, we were talking about the different versions of the model. And I just put this together to explain it a little better. The tool that I use, RSAD, has its own native tool format. And that's what the tool produces. Then it has a web publish capability, which converts it to HTML. And that's what I sent to Peter, and he puts up on the web. Then there's an export capability to put it into the standard XMI format. And supposedly you can then import that into any other UML tool. And I think it's pretty widely supported. So I've tested it. Well, I actually tested it two ways. I sent a small one to Bruce.
McNaughton.
I'm sorry?
Yes, Bruce McNaughton.
Yes, Bruce McNaughton, some time ago, and he was able to import it into his tool. I think he uses one called Sparks. And then I've created a large one, pretty much the whole model, and I was able to re-import it into my tool. So that seems to work. The only thing is it does not include the diagrams. Now, I've read that there's a separate diagram standard format, but it appears not to be used, and it does not appear to be available. So that's a downside of it. Then we talked about the format. I don't think this is all that important, but I just showed it. You get a folder of two subfolders, content, images, and a couple other files. This banner is just a decoration on the initial splash screen. You can do your own. And in the content, there's a whole ton of, probably hundreds of 2, 3, 4K files. And in the images, there's actually images. And again, there's hundreds of these. So this is sort of a conceptual model of the model. Seems to me the most important thing is the semantic model, which is in the tool, is created in the tool. This has all the definitions, and if you manage it properly, they're all uniquely named, well-defined, and not redundant. And they exist within the modeling tool, and you can create views, which typically are diagrams, but they're both can include text. So it's a combination. Then if this exists within ISSS, there's this HTML version, which allows you to view all of the diagrams, view all the views, but you can't change anything. there's also the knowledge that we're looking at that exists within ISS that can be linked to and included by reference in effect. And I do have a few of these, which I've done, and that works fine. And this is all in a larger context of the web. And there's a lot of things on the web, like Wikipedia, articles on specific people, their home sites. Many papers, I was surprised to find how many papers are available on the web. And in some cases, entire books. Then there's also things outside the web. Now, this involves work to get it into the model because you typically have to rekey it or somehow get it in. We've just been talking about that with the OCS. What I've done in different contexts in business is sort of a collective learning where there's some people who review the model and provide feedback. And hopefully this would be a significant group. So this becomes the class group or community model, probably the best thing to call it, rather than just a single person's model. So that sort of covers it. So that was it. I just had a couple slides.
Awesome. That's super helpful.
I think that last slide, the semantic model one, was the one that you wanted to make points on it. So that's the key graphic that we were trying to cover last time.
Yes, that's right.
Maybe just bring the whole thing back up, and then I'll
You want me to bring it up?
or just
Yeah,
flip over that slide, 58.
The last one, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, I'll bring the screenshot into the coda.
What I think's interesting challenge is the last figures you put up there, Tom, which is review and feedback and community engagement. Obviously, you are the author of it and hold the semantic model core component. And so any feedback has to come to you for you to then change the model as it is sitting on your computer. And it's not a dynamic update to the web, which is where everybody can see it. It's quite a process of zipping and unzipping and posting and linking. And I'm just wondering about that as a process to look at the model that you've developed, in a sense. And I wonder if there's any way in which models like this can be collaboratively developed and how approvals or not get made about representations. I don't know what's going on in the systems engineering, model-based systems engineering world with SysML and how groups collaborate on model building. Maybe Gary can come and tell us about that. Or if anyway, it's interesting.
You're right. That is an issue, and I've discussed it somewhat with Bruce and Gary Smith.
Okay.
They seem to have a different way of doing it where they did have multiple people had access to the same model. They were able to keep it coordinated. That's the thing that I'm most concerned about, is keeping it coordinated, not losing the discipline of managing it to keep it adaptable, because you have to keep changing it. It has to maintain its adaptability. And most models that I've seen in the real world, they become non-maintainable after a period of time because they're not based on a management discipline that is able to maintain it. So I took adaptability as a core principle for it. So I agree that that's an issue, and we could discuss maybe ways to deal with it. But
Well,
at the current time,
yeah.
the updates would have to come to me, and I would put changes in. And there's a question of how to manage that too. I don't want to necessarily be managing the whole thing. How do we decide what it should be?
Well, that's it. And at the moment, of course, you're the only person with that software. So while it resides on your software, you're the control point, and therefore you're the controller of the model representation. And the filter through which all the suggested changes would go. And I'm not sure, we haven't yet, apart from what you've just told us about your ability to export and Bruce's to do a limited import, it would be good if we had some documentation of that for this group, or we did it as a group or something, or that it was, within the ISSS record or something, so that we had that capacity to do that. Should you not be able to do it?
Does anyone else in our group do UML modeling and have a tool? I could send them a model and see if they could import it. Apparently,
I don't. Well, just to that last point, I don't have the software, but what I would do is I would set up a virtual machine with the UML software in it, so that could be sent around as a blob for people to open up just a virtual machine on their computer. As to that's an interesting question about the model-based systems here for this knowledge architecture. One aspect of this is we have the kind of chapter 5 by George. Another aspect is that the articulation here sets up those discussions, like, is there one semantic model or are there multiple semantic models? So that sets up this question of actually accepting semantic changes. But then maybe the semantic model is versioned every 6 months with this and that procedure. But then people have another, if they're just making views, then that obviously doesn't make changes to the underlying knowledge model. So so just that's the core articulation that enables there hopefully to be a better collaboration around it, because we can be clear about when there's an underlying semantic change and evaluate it for what it is, not how it looks. And then just taking different views on the semantic model, there's essentially never a reason to limit that, because the underlying relationality is unchanged. And then people can just present and make views as they want. Right?
Yes, the last part, I agree with 100%. The views are decoupled from the model, the semantic model. So you can make as many views as you want. You can look at it from different angles, different perspectives, different levels of detail. And I find that to be very, very powerful. The semantic model, though, you want to maintain, and that's important to control. Now, I started the model that we're talking about, which I call systems common, is a simpler model of the one that I really want to do, which is system types. And I've done some work on that, but that's not available on the web. This systems common model is mostly factual, so there's not a whole lot of controversy about it. It's people, their names, their birth dates, text about them, documents that they've produced, organizations, and so on. So it's non-controversial. So I avoided that problem with this model. Now, if you got to another model where you're trying to describe the right ontology for systems as a whole, that's more or less what George has done. And that becomes a whole different animal.
One approach. Oh yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Well, no, I was going to say, when you said chapter 5 in George's book, do you mean you mean his second book, right?
Yes.
Yeah, knowledge systems engineering.
Yeah. Okay.
But one approach that's taken by the Sumo project, suggested upper merged ontology, which we're pretty familiar with, is that the upper ontology is not is different settings. It's not like, but just conceptually, the upper ontology is more like an operating system. It's just like a scaffold for different modules, and as much as possible is pushed to the mid-level ontologies. So the innermost semantic model might just be like a module loader or composer, and then there'd be a module people, another module ISSS archives, another module system science, and so that is where in the system science semantic module you would have whatever relevant discussion or approach was about the actual terms, topics, relationships, assertions within system science, but potentially the biographical module might be able to have a different versioning system or stewardship. And then like there's kind of like a, just like compiling a Linux kernel, say, okay, now we're doing the ISSS 2023 release. Here are the compilation flags. We're compiling these 5 modules in. Concatenate or compose the modules that are being included and say this is BIOS version 1, system science version 2, you know, ISSS archives version 3. That gets rolled into the full model release on it, and then views exist on the full model release. But different versions of the full model you might want different versions of the full model. Just like there's different Linux kernels. And then different interfaces, like for the graphics.
Well, it's really an interesting question then of governance, and I find you then get into some very interesting conversations about who's governing what.
Yeah, that's what I tried to avoid initially.
I know. It's why I created the world of systems, just to get these multiple kind of views and to think about the consequences. But it's come up in another group that I'm working with who have decided, and a couple of people have gone off in their own way and decided a software and a structure of conversations that they want to have about the topic that is not in agreement with the rest of, or many of the other members of the community. And they structured it in the way that they want to structure it, not through which the community has decided. And then you get into how would the community decide anyway. And it's the same question here with your 3 black people in the top right-hand corner, providing feedback. And okay, so in, or even taking in consideration chapter 5 from George's book, how George might structure it as opposed to Tom. Anyway, I don't have an answer to this, but I do find it to be a part of the nub of the issue myself. I don't know, George, what do you think?
Well, pardon me. Chapter 4 is the chapter devoted to languaging and representation, in which I developed this mathematical framework. I hate to, actually, I'm even steering away from calling it a mathematical framework. It confuses you. It's using mathematics to describe, and in particular, graph theory and set theory. But the point I want to make is that what I define in there is a general purpose structure for all knowledge. Now, whether or not you fill it in by going through the analytic phase and finding what the pieces are and stick them in there. But my big question would be, how does this map onto something like what I've developed, which I've used on many occasions. And so I have a certain amount of confidence that it covers a lot of ground that would normally be considered knowledge engineering.
But it exists at the moment in words in the book, and presumably in some form
Yeah,
in PowerPoint somewhere, right?
well, Shanghai and Daniel and I have discussed, it's more than words. I actually give database structures
Okay.
that could be used, but the mathematical formulation in chapter 4 gives the fundamental stuff that you have to collect and how to organize it. And then the chapter 5 goes into the sort of the overall process of how you analyze things, how you collect the information on systems, and knowledge is itself a system, right? The
Yeah.
organization of knowledge is a system. And then I think it's, yeah, that's the one, Rob.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that we could use the framework and the diagram laid out in 5 and first analyze this existing knowledge system of interest accordingly, at least categorizing it into that way?
Yeah, well, what I was going to say is, so what you've got here is some tools for representing or making available whatever knowledge you've collected, right? And that's all. That's part of. Remember, Daniel, we were talking about the sort of the front end of the analysis and the front end of the knowledge base, and so forth, making visible what you've got internally as far as the knowledge base is concerned. But that doesn't address, I mean, my guess is that when you start defining the semantic model, that's a kind of an open-ended task. And it's basically going to come down to what any one person's opinion is about what the definition of something is. And the beauty of using an existing systems framework is that it guides exactly what you're going to be talking about and when you talk about it, and then how you talk about it, giving rise to then these semantic models. So I guess that's my suggestion, is that that's how I would approach it if I were a younger man.
Yeah.
One thing is that there's a big advantage of using UML because it is well defined and coherent. And there were many man years of research that went into doing it by some very good semanticists. And in effect, it's like a meta model. So there's things like classes and relationships, and they're all very well defined. So I can leverage those. It's also very modifiable. So I can take a existing relationship and stereotype into something more specific. So many of the discussions that we have, there's no such underlying framework. Everyone has their own idea of what a word is, And it seems to me a lot of the discussion, and I don't mean so much this particular group, but other ISSS SIGs that I've been involved in, people are using words that are very ambiguous.
Oh
And they're
yeah.
not really communicating very well. And I think it's been well noted by many people.
Yeah.
Well, I again, to this kind of like enablement or creating the container that multiple perspectives can coexist within, having the index card for the term is the first step, and potentially that, you know, ISSS hosts and multiple views on a given term, but we at least can use the exact token across different areas, and then have the kinds of systems that support people making assertions or definitions. Yeah, Rob, what do you think?
I think this touches on the earlier conversation about taxonomies, because the endeavor to create a new semantic model for ISSS, I think more Tom's systems common model, we can look to leverage existing ontologies and taxonomies out there. And so a lot of the terms in the diagram are covered by very well-established ontologies created by the archivists, by Google, by other major repositories who deal with the same problem and the same issues. And of course, the advantage of using an existing standard or an existing ontology is that we have a lot of connectability or searchability from those tool sets as well. So I think we can separate out the common model bit, which is basically the index cards that you're alluding to, and the systems types a model that Thomas talked about, which is very system specific, which does, I think, need some sort of agreement with. But I don't think we want to get into the game of trying to create a new ontology for archives and records. We're more interested in creating an ontology for system sciences.
Right. Well, in the spirit of making exciting things boring, / being excited by that, using the standard document management and knowledge engineering techniques, applying it to system science, and then also ISSS in feedback, in review and feedback, take supporting pluralism by it will be clear when are we just hosting an index card versus when is there who made what assertion about what this word means. And it may not even be required to have like an ISSS endorsed definition of a given term. We'll just say, well, in this document, this is how this person defined it. In this document, this is how this person defined it. So off-sourcing the semantics to documents that people made, and then off-sourcing semantics in this new way using language models. But then somebody could always say, well, oh yeah, but when I use, and I mean, but, so the language model doesn't really understand my speaking or something like that. But outside of that, like kind of like I'm using language in a way not to be understood way, which is not how most people write, then we can use that to rapidly index. And so then that's where some of the synonym debates come into play. So instead of saying A is a synonym for B, somebody could assert that, and we could point at their assertion that A and B were synonyms. Or we can just say that their semantic neighborhoods as evaluated by this language model were similar. So these are candidate close to synonymous. Doesn't mean that they are, doesn't mean you think so, doesn't mean a future language model would also think so. But that's why like having the version of the OCR, the version of the language model used, that's equivalent to like who said what when.
Yeah.
But if things are all assertions in the system, like every edit is proposed or is accepted by somebody, and then the assertions are either made by specific people at specific times or by specific reproducible computations, then we'll have at least a description of the system.
Yeah, that's the way, that is exciting. That's the way the taxonomists seem to be moving now, a multifaceted classifications, where you bring in the facet that you're looking at in any particular classification, but there's multiple facets that you can apply to the same raw data.
And then people can develop their own, and this person's ontology, and then those are different views.
Yeah.
And so that then we move a lot of these discussions to the view layer. And if someone says, I think there should be 3 core principles and they're 1, 2, 3, and someone says, I think there should be 12, and here they are, and someone else says, I'm just going to go with what this person said, like all of those people actually have exactly what they want, but it was too big and contradictory to fight over the middle.
Yes.
Good introduction to the problems with the types model is the first question is, what is the system? And I started with the idea there was one definition of what a system was, and I was soon disabused with that idea. I've collected probably about 50 different versions of definitions of system, and I tried to put them in a general to specific, at least some of them, general to specific framework, calling it A, B, C to G. You might have seen that around somewhere. So yes, you can define each separate one separately, give it a different name or different qualification or something, and refer to it that way. But it seems to me what you really want is a whole body that is coherent, that all fits together. And there might be several of those, but that's okay.
Well, one of the problems, though, Tom, with that, this is what I experienced. There are a lot of different people who have, in fact, defined this is what a system is. They run quite a range, and their worldview has a great deal to do with how they decide to define it. And the problem that I find is not many of them actually cover what could be all different kinds of systems.
Exactly.
So taking the approach that Tyler Volk and I have taken, which is to go across the entire scale from the most minute aspects and the big history of the universe, and covering what does systemness mean at this level, at this level, at this level, and so forth, all the way up, is a better way to approach what is common about all of these that gives rise to systems of increasing complexity, and then boil that down to a definition. And that's what I try to do.
I totally agree with you. And I've worked with Tyler in that direction a bit as well.
I mean, my comment on that would be, in a common reference frame, semantic reference frame, but also literal citation / reference frame. If someone said, someone, says, I made systems, here's what it is, they have to at least put it on the table. And then George or someone can make an assertion that theirs is incomplete or it limited in these ways. And then that would just be system science. People proposing improvements and elaborations, generalizations, making comments and critiques. I'm also reminded of a kind of ongoing, just semi-related, but probably within our areas of interest. There was a preprint about integrated information theory as a pseudoscience, was like the title, and it was like this big discussion, but it just shows that there's like discussions at multiple levels, like even, of course, what is system science. However, things remain sometimes frustratingly on square 0 or 1, because although biology, it's like, oh, we can't agree with what a species is, but biology is kind of a thing. This not being able to understand systems is really hampering for system science. And then when people try to come together, first off, they're not actually always trying to come together. And that's been the challenge, but this is a methodological route to surfacing the past, facilitating collaboration in the moment. nucleating better discourse around system science.
In the neurosciences, for example, you got Tononi, or however you pronounce it, integrated information, you got Friston, free energy minimization. You got all of these different big theories that have substantial mathematical frameworks existing. But they all are talking about slightly different things. One of the things, by the way, I like about Bobby Azarian is he actually talks about both of those kinds of models and how they might be, including global workspace models and so forth. So, but the difference is those are sciences. They're empirical sciences. And so what they're doing is generating theories that then presumably could be tested. System science is a meta science. It's not the same kind of science as any one of the individual sciences. And so as a consequence, the theories that are produced in system science have to be able to cover all of the different sciences, not just particular to one area. So I think it's important to keep that in mind in terms of deciding, well, what is an ontology and what is the kind of framework that we want to use. My 2 cents.
Pure system science, it's like there is a difference between disciplinary work and system science. It's not always simply black and white, because but when there's so much of the space between, or 99% disciplinary with a little bit of a nod or a kind, then we don't have the full dynamic range. And then with the limited amount of attention on pure system science, then that's why everything ends up being, I mean, just empirically, what are the publications, millions of publications per year? They're disciplinary with little nibble towards systems, when the system science view is like there's kind of like a crystalline nexus that goes beyond any system of interest, like by definition as the system of interest being system. And then from that flows out to different use cases, systems of interest for various situational needs. So it's like, instead of just, but there's a lot to that view. Hence, it remains challenging to convey and orient attention towards. But the few people who see it in the moment make the epistemic niche that future people think differently in. But there's disciplinary ideas that took long times with empirical referent, with replicable experiments, still a long march. The tantalizing part about systems is that it seems like you could just think differently and then it would be done, but apparently not. So
George and I were younger, we'd take it on the rest of our career.
everybody helps in their own time and ways, so it's all good.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Until
Daniel.
next time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.